Hello and welcome to exercise physiology. Today's screencast is going to be looking at recovery. Now we've so far completed energy systems, we've critically evaluated them, and then we've had a look at the energy continuum and looking at which energy system is predominant based upon a variety of factors. Now the last thing we need to have a look at is we need to have a look at recovery. So basically I'm going to split this into two podcasts. The first podcast, which is this one, is going to be an introduction to try and give you the kind of background or backdrop to recovery. The second podcast is where you need to make sure you've got really good notes. I will tell you, this is just a kind of an explanation into what you'll actually be doing for your note taking in the second podcast. So if I start off and just say, obviously we've looked at exercise, you've looked at the energy systems you use whilst you're exercising. What we have to look at now is a case of, first of all, kind of performing the exercise, and then we have a look at how, when we finish, we repay any oxygen debt that we have. So, if we start off, okay, just have a quick read of this. So, when you start exercising, you're running, you're legging it, you start off on a run, you're doing a 5k run, I don't know, whatever you're doing, you're starting in a game. You require more oxygen than you can actually consume. And when this happens, okay, this is called an oxygen deficit, okay? So you have a deficit because you can't get enough oxygen, okay? So if I was going to say to you now, okay, is if you were going to do one thing, you probably want to have a quick description there of an oxygen deficit. If you're somebody who likes equations, it makes it easy, you can put that in. Are you ever going to be examined on this? No. A knowledge of it will help you when you come to actually talking about recovery systems. So, going on from there. If we talked about the oxygen deficit, if you have a quick look here, okay, if you put this, I would definitely say that you're going to need this diagram. You only need to draw the diagram once. You'll need to label a number of things on it. So, as you can see there, the arrow is pointing to this point when you start running. Okay, it might be, let's say we use a 5k as an example. Okay, you can't get the amount of oxygen you need. Okay, so the oxygen you're consuming is less than the oxygen that's required. So this deficit is pointing here, so this blue bit. The exercise line here is actually what your running time is, your heart rate or your VO2 max as you go up there. Okay, this bit here is the oxygen you can't get. Okay, and that is why you start to fatigue. Now the thing that will dictate how much of an oxygen deficit you have, okay, is going to be this and this. That would make sense. The harder you're running, the more of a deficit you're going to get. So, as a result of that, okay, we finish exercise. Once you stop exercising, okay, your body doesn't immediately turn to its kind of resting heart rate. All right, it remains elevated for some time, and the reason why is because a number of processes happen in order to make sure that we get ourselves back to a kind of resting state. So, the focus is we need to quickly replace oxygen and ATP. Okay, in order to do that, we need oxygen. So, what happens? There is a process. So at the moment I'm asking you, I've asked you to do firstly maybe a quick definition on oxygen deficit. Then I've asked you to do a diagram that kind of very clearly shows where the oxygen deficit is. Then when you finish exercise, the concept or the term that is used to describe repaying the oxygen deficit we had at the start of our exercise period is called EPOC. Now EPOC stands for excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. Okay, so when we exercise, we have excess oxygen we can use, and we use it for two very specific recovery systems. Now, if you look onto here, as we have a go, we've already talked about the deficit, okay, which is over here. When we finish exercise, we have this period of EPOC where we have this extra oxygen we can use to repay the oxygen deficit we had. Now, in order to do that, there are two systems. The two systems, which are going to be the key focus of our lesson, are going to be these. Firstly, it says here alactic, okay? So alactacid is what I'm going to call it. So alactacid instead of alactic. So you will put A-L-A-C-T. Make sure you got that. And then ACID instead of alactic. Okay, so alactacid. So you've got that there, and this first recovery system is the fast recovery. So it recovers all the things that we can recover quickly. And basically, if you think about it like this, certain things are going to deplete earlier when you start running. For example, if you start sprinting at the start of a 5k race and you're trying to get into position, you're going to deplete your PC and ATP stores. So when you stop exercise, EPOC, the first process or first part of EPOC is called the alactic acid recovery, and it's the fast component, and its job is to repay the ATP and PC stores, okay, that depleted when you started your exercise. That's all I need from now. Second thing, there's a slow component, and this takes a little bit longer to kick in. So what happens here is, or a little bit longer to complete, this recovery system is called the lactic acid recovery system, and this is the slow component of the recovery system, and it takes longer, and I'll explain why when we go into it in a little bit more detail into the lesson. So basically the key focus of this, you can pick out a word, is lactic acid. Now the key focus of this is to remove lactic acid. In order to remove the lactic acid, we need oxygen, and we need longer for it to take place. So I will explain that when we go on to podcast 2. For now, what do I need from you? As I've said before, we need oxygen deficit. What does it mean? 2, we need a graph. 3, oxygen deficit needs to be labelled on the graph. 4, you need your 2, or you need EPOC as a kind of a summary of that period after we finished exercise, so excess post exercise oxygen consumption. And then on your diagram as well, you need to have an understanding that there are 2 key components of your recovery. The first one, alactic acid, which is here, and the second one is the lactic acid. Okay, so that's it for now. That's podcast 1. That's your introduction. That's to get your brains familiar with it. Your second podcast, which you need to complete before Thursday's lesson, is going to be actually on this first and fast component. I'm going to ask you to make some Cornell notes on this. Okay, thank you very much.